Hello everyone and welcome back for another of my video lecture series. In this video I'll be discussing about the anatomy of the limbus. When we talk about the limbus of the eye, there's so much confusion regarding the boundaries and various terms pertaining to it, like what is the anatomical limbus, what is the surgical limbus, what are the exact demarcations for these, what is the blue zone and white zone, what are the palisades of Vogt, and finally, how is the internal anatomy with the angle structures related to the limbus. So in this video, I will explain all these things in detail and also all the applied clinically relevant aspects with respect to the limbus. So basically, the limbus can be understood from 2 points of view. These are the anatomical limbus and the surgical limbus. So first I will discuss what exactly is the anatomical limbus, and after that move on to the surgical limbus. So if we have to define the limbus, what exactly is it? It is nothing but the transition zone from the corneal epithelium to the conjunctival epithelium and from the corneal stroma to the sclera. So the anatomical limbus means that we are defining the limbus from a histological or pathological perspective. So to see the limbus from a histological or pathological perspective, we need to view the limbus in the cross section of the eye to see the exact zone of transition. So here you can see the cross section diagram that I have sketched and shown. So first, let us identify all the structures in this cross section diagram, and then we will define the zone and boundaries of the anatomical limbus. So on the extreme right side of this diagram is the cornea, and we are all well versed with the 5 layers of the cornea. The mnemonic for that is A, B, C, D, E from anterior to posterior. That is the anterior epithelium, followed by the Bowman's layer, then the corneal stroma, the Descemet's membrane, and the endothelium. So in this diagram, the Bowman's layer is shaded as a red line behind the corneal epithelium. The first landmark to see is the termination of the Bowman's layer, and that is also the point at which the corneal epithelium changes into the limbal epithelium. Now the limbal epithelium is shown here in orange, and you can see a crypt-like depression of the limbal epithelium. This is where the limbal stem cells reside, and this is also the source for the corneal epithelial cells in the corneal epithelial regenerative process. Now these limbal epithelial crypts are called as the palisades of Vogt. I'll discuss more on these palisades later. Now the limbal epithelium continues for about half a millimeter and then converts into the conjunctival epithelium. Also, the subconjunctival connective tissue or substantia propria starts where the termination of the Bowman's layer is and continues below the conjunctival epithelium. Let's go to a lower level, the corneal stroma, in this diagram shown in light blue. So, at the level of termination of the Bowman's layer, we can see that the corneal stroma starts transitioning into the sclera. As we go ahead, we see a smooth convex shaped termination of the corneal stroma, and the sclera shown here in grey has a concave shape surrounding the termination of the corneal stroma. This junction between the two is called as the scleral sulcus. After this point, the opaque scleral fibers continue throughout. Coming a level lower in the corneal stroma is the Descemet's membrane and the endothelium shown in dark blue. Note the point of termination of the Descemet's membrane and endothelium is beyond the level of termination of the Bowman's layer. Now the point of termination of the Descemet's membrane is called as the Schwalbe's line. Beyond that line lies the trabecular meshwork, which we all know is the site of resistance for aqueous outflow, which is shown here in green. Now as you can see here, the trabecular meshwork is seen as a obtuse angle triangle on cross section. Now just above the distal part of the trabecular meshwork is the Schlemm's canal into which the aqueous drains out. Beyond the trabecular meshwork, we can see a small protrusion of the sclera into the angle of the eye, and this is called as the scleral spur. Then comes the uveal tissue, which is shown in brown. A small part of the ciliary body is inserted onto the scleral spur, and this is called as ciliary body band. After the ciliary body band, we can see the root of the iris. Now all these structures, the Schwalbe's line, the trabecular meshwork, the scleral spur, the ciliary body band, and the root of the iris are nothing but the structures that constitute the anterior chamber angle, all of which can be viewed on gonioscopy. So if you see this gonioscopy photo over here, the Schwalbe's line is seen as a faint thin line above, followed by a thin white zone, which is the anterior trabecular meshwork, followed by a brownish zone, which is the posterior trabecular meshwork, again followed by a thin white zone, which is the scleral spur, then a brown zone again of the ciliary body band. So in a wide open angle as shown here, all these structures should be discretely seen. So I hope up till now all the anatomical landmarks have been understood well. Now it is time to understand the boundaries and the extent of the anatomical limbus. And for that, we have to see these 5 transition zones which I have shown marked with arrows. First, the termination of the Bowman's layer. Second, the junction of the limbal with the conjunctival epithelium. Third, the scleral sulcus. Fourth, the Schwalbe's line, which is the termination of the Descemet's membrane. And finally, the scleral spur. Now, the anatomical limbus is the zone between two imaginary straight lines. The anterior line joins the termination of the Bowman's layer to the Schwalbe's line, and the second posterior line is from the end of the limbal epithelium around the scleral sulcus to behind the scleral spur. So the anatomical limbus is defined as the oblique zone of transition as seen on cross section between the corneal epithelium and conjunctival epithelium above, which is narrow, and the corneal stroma and sclera below, which is wide. So this is the anatomical limbus. Now we can see the lowermost part of the anatomical limbus, which is constituted by the angle structures, is about 1 millimeter when the angle is wide open and all the structures are visible, and the upper extent, which constitutes the epithelial part, is about 0.5 millimeters. However, in the superior and inferior limbus, the limbal epithelium actually extends more into the cornea with the earlier termination of the Bowman's layer. So, in the superior and inferior limbus, the upper extent of the limbal epithelium also measures about 1 millimeter as compared to the 0.5 millimeters of the horizontal limbus. So this is something that has to be remembered. Okay, so we have seen what is the anatomical limbus. Let us understand little more about what are palisades of Vogt. These are also called as the limbal palisades. As I had mentioned earlier, they are depressions or crypts in the limbal epithelium in which the limbal stem cells reside. Now these palisades are not present all throughout the epithelium, but they are present at regular intervals in the limbus with small gaps in the middle. So if we take a tangential section of the limbus, we will see these palisades at regular intervals with intervening subconjunctival tissue, which can be seen here in brown color, protruding between the palisades. So when you look at this from outside, it gives a serrated margin-like appearance to the limbus. So you can see that in this photo, how the palisades are prominently seen as serrated margins. Now the presence of palisades is very inconsistent and they are not always present in all individuals and equally distributed all throughout. So as in this photo you can see they are more prominent superiorly and inferiorly as compared to the nasal and temporal parts. So now we have seen that the anatomical limbus is defined from a histological perspective in cross section. So what is the important clinical application of understanding the anatomical limbus in such detail? It doesn't have much role for us surgeons, it is more helpful to the pathologists to identify the anatomical limbus. But one important clinical application for us is in identifying the landmarks on anterior segment OCT images, because nowadays anterior segment OCT images are used to grade the anterior chamber angle. So just let us see how knowing the boundaries of the anatomical limbus helps in that regard. Now look at this anterior segment OCT image showing the angle and the limbus, and let us compare the landmarks between the OCT image and the image that we have already seen. So the most prominent thing that can be seen in this OCT image is the scleral sulcus, which looks pretty similar to the diagram already shown. The scleral sulcus can be seen as this concave zone of sclerocorneal transition. Due to the homogeneous nature of the corneal stroma, it appears dark on OCT, whereas the sclera, because of its heterogeneity, appears white. So the scleral sulcus can be well demarcated on the OCT. We can also see this triangular structure of the trabecular meshwork similar to how it actually appears in the schematic photo. Now just behind the trabecular meshwork, we can also see the scleral spur as a protrusion. You can see that I have measured the distance from the Schwalbe's line, which is the start of the trabecular meshwork, to the scleral spur, which is coming to about 1 millimeter as shown on this OCT measurement. Again, this is similar to what we have seen, as this zone is 1 millimeter. So thus we can say that this OCT image shows a wide open angle by Schaffer's grading about grade 3 to 4. Now look at this OCT image. We can see the triangular trabecular meshwork, but we can't really delineate its posterior extent. It is somewhat merging with the root of the iris in this photo, and there is no view of the scleral spur. So in this photo, this is a partially open angle. Probably this is grade 2 as per Schaffer's classification. In this next OCT photo, we can see only a small part of the anterior trabecular meshwork and nothing else. So this is a grade 1 angle, which is called as a occludable angle. And in this last photo, we can see that the trabecular meshwork is not visible at all. We can see that the scleral sulcus is merging with the root of the iris directly. So this becomes a grade 0 or a closed angle configuration. So, as you have seen, with a good strong conceptual understanding of the anatomical limbus, we can apply it to grade and quantify the anterior chamber angle on OCT, thus helping in glaucoma diagnosis and management. So that was all about the anatomical limbus, and now let's move on to understanding the surgical limbus, because the main clinical significance of the limbus lies in understanding the surgical limbus. So why do we have a surgical limbus as a separate entity from the anatomical limbus? Basically, as eye surgeons, we don't have much use of understanding the limbal landmarks in cross section, but rather as seen from above while performing surgery. So all these 5 limbal landmarks that I have spoken to you earlier about, they need to be understood from the surface itself. So to do that, we draw imaginary perpendicular lines to the landmarks described to create a surgical limbus. So the first perpendicular line drawn is from the termination of the Bowman's layer all the way down. The second line drawn is from the end of the limbal epithelium downwards and intersects at the Schwalbe's line. The third line is from the scleral spur upwards. So now with these 3 lines, we have a surgical limbus. The rectangular zone within the first and third line is called as the surgical limbus. The anterior zone between the first and second line, this is called as the blue zone because it appears bluish in color from outside as seen in this adjacent diagram. This thin blue ring that you can see all around the cornea, this is nothing but the blue zone. As we have seen previously also, the blue zone is narrow horizontally about 0.5 millimeters, and since the limbal epithelium extends more into the cornea in the superior and inferior parts, that's why the blue zone is around 1 millimeter superiorly and inferiorly. This is also the reason as to why the corneal diameter is lesser vertically than horizontally. That is because the limbus extends more into the cornea superiorly and inferiorly. Now coming to the white zone. The white zone is that part which lies between the second and third line on cross section, and this white zone is a constant 1 millimeter zone which is around the blue zone. If seen from above, it is seen merging with the surrounding conjunctiva. Now although the white zone cannot be demarcated clearly, with a sound understanding we should be able to locate the structures. So this white zone is where the trabecular meshwork lies, and the end of the zone is where the scleral spur lies. The reason why the blue zone appears blue is because we are seeing basically the clear corneal stroma which is beneath the epithelium. So it partially transmits light through it, giving a translucent blue appearance as you can see. But the white zone, we are seeing the scleral fibers from above, so it makes it opaque and hence the color is white. Now many times, due to the palisades and heavy conjunctival pigmentation around the limbus which is commonly seen in Indian population, the blue zone is not seen well with the conjunctiva intact. Instead, we see this brownish palisading pigmentation at the limbus. This pigmentation can extend even beyond the blue zone into the white zone as you can see in this photo. Hence, better demarcation of the surgical limbus landmarks are always made during surgery after a conjunctival periotomy has been performed. So this is a picture from a trabeculectomy surgery being done after the conjunctival periotomy is completed. Note the blue zone here in this area. Now a 1 millimeter zone beyond this blue zone is the white zone, and this is where the trabecular meshwork and the Schlemm's canal lie. As in trabeculectomy, when we make a partial thickness scleral flap, note we are now entering into the corneal stroma even in the white zone. Hence, note how the color of the white zone also becomes bluish, because here we are directly above the Schlemm's canal. While the blue zone, instead of appearing blue, now actually appears transparent because we are in the cornea with only the Descemet's membrane and endothelium below. So This just shows that after we have made the scleral flap in trabeculectomy, the color of the blue zone and the white zone changes. The blue zone becomes transparent and the white zone appears bluish now. So I hope with all these diagrams, all the surgical limbus landmarks have been understood well. Just to complete the theory part, this anteriormost line that we were referring to, this is called as the anterior limbal line or the corneolimbal junction. The second line at the termination of the blue zone, this is called as the mid-limbal line or the sclerolimbal junction. And the third line passing through the scleral spur is called as the posterior limbal line. This line cannot be seen or demarcated. We have to measure it 1 millimeter behind the mid-limbal line. So by now this must have become clear that the most important landmark that we have to look for is the mid-limbal line, since all the other landmarks for surgical planning can be made with respect to this mid-limbal line. Let us quickly identify all these landmarks. Firstly, the Schwalbe's line is at the mid-limbal line. The termination of the Bowman's layer is 0.5 mm or 1 mm in front of the blue limbal line, depending on whether you are in the horizontal or the vertical part of the cornea. The trabecular meshwork starts behind the mid-limbal line and extends for 1 mm beyond it. The Schlemm's canal starts 0.5 mm beyond the mid-limbal line. The scleral spur is exactly 1 mm behind it. Now, we know the root of the iris starts from behind the scleral spur. So, anytime we have to do a iridodialysis repair or identify the insertion of the iris, this is 1.5 mm behind the mid-limbal line. Now for complex anterior segment surgeries like for SFIOL, for capsule tension ring suturing, all the instruments have to pass through the ciliary sulcus. So this should be measured 2 mm beyond the mid-limbal line or 1 mm beyond the scleral spur. The pars plana starts 3 mm beyond it. So that's why for pars plana vitrectomy, we go 3 mm behind the mid-limbal line. So in this photo, this is an example of a surgery being done for a subluxated cataract where a capsule tension ring needs to be inserted for capsular bag support. Note how the surgeon is making the groove for insertion of the instruments 1 mm behind the scleral spur, so that, as I have already mentioned, he can enter into the pars plicata just behind the iris. So we see in this photo, through this groove the needle is entering posterior to the iris. So this was just an example to show you the importance of knowing your limbal landmarks. And with this, we complete the entire theory of anatomy of the limbus. I hope all the concepts have been well understood and the subject matter can be applied for clinical practice. Thank you.